guys, thank you for joining me this morning. It is now 9:30, so we will get underway. So obviously you guys can get on with the rest of your day. So if I can just ask you all make sure that you are on mute for me, and if I can just ask if anyone has a question, can they please pop that in the chat function at any point during the presentation, and then I will address your questions at the end of the presentation before we go away today. We'll also use these to create a further answer and questions document which will be available on the website in the next couple of weeks. So welcome to today's presentation, which is around the Team Leader Supervisor Level 3 and Operations Departmental Manager Level 5 today. So just a bit about myself. My name's Lisa Williams and I am the lead IQA at Pearson for the Team Leader and Operations Departmental Manager qualifications. So I will be taking you through the presentation and slides today. And as I've mentioned, if you do have any questions, please put them in the chat box throughout the presentation, and then we can address these at the end for you. So just a little bit more about myself. I have worked in the industry for over 10 years now in a range of roles, and I have been with Pearson for approximately 3 years as an endpoint assessor, and then moving into a lead IQA around endpoint assessment approximately a year ago for the standards that we're about to go through today. So I do hope that you find this of use today, and any feedback is greatly appreciated, and if there's anything else you'd like to see in preparation for any of the presentations that we do and support that we give here at Pearson. So the aims for today's session are to take you through the EPA process, including the ACE system, talk around timescales in regards to endpoint assessment, apprentice preparation, the components and documentation that the apprentice will be undertaking, and then the grading around the qualifications as well. So the first area that we're going to look at today is the EPA process. So on my screen, you will see a screenshot of the ACE system, which shows the Team Leader Supervisor standard. So any apprentice that needs to move forward to endpoint assessment does have to have their gateway completed and documents uploaded to the ACE system. So you'll see where it says gateway components on the top left part of my screen where my mouse is pointing. And then underneath this, you'll see 4 boxes. So these are the boxes which detail the evidence that is required against each standard. Obviously, this does vary depending on the standard that the apprentice is undertaking. And if you hover over it, it will give you brief notes around what is required. Now, for the Team Leader Supervisor gateway, we do require a copy of the apprentice's English and Maths qualifications to show that they hold the relevant level. So you would upload maybe a certificate or the results record to those areas. We also then require the Gateway Declaration form. So this is a form that should be completed at the Gateway meeting between the apprentice, yourselves as the provider, and the employer. And this should clearly document the apprentice's gateway meeting date, and the signatures and dates should also tally with that date in order for it to be accepted. On the right hand side, you'll see it shows basic information. So this is where it provides information around the apprentice, so things like contact details, and then there's also a tab as well for employer details. Now, this is information that you as providers will input into the ACE system. So it is extremely important that the information you put in is accurate and that you put in as much information as possible, as this is what the independent endpoint assessor will use to try and make contact with your apprentice. So obviously incorrect phone numbers or no contact information can delay the booking of endpoint assessment. So if you can make sure that you input that and double check to make sure that we've got everything that we need for that. So once you guys have uploaded your documents, that is when we will then go through and check the gateway documents to make sure we have everything that is required to move the apprentice forward. So I have placed some steps below in regards to how the providers need to upload the documentation, and we do have we can send this out as well on a document if you need to do so, so you can refer to this at a later date as well. So you'll upload all your evidence against the gateway components, and you will be expected to complete notes in the section to indicate what evidence has been uploaded. It will require you to add the notes. It won't allow you to move forward without doing so. The training provider yourselves then have the gateway declaration. So as I say, this is a form that shows that you've had the meeting and that everybody's happy that the apprentice is ready to move forward. And again, notes are required in the mandatory field. It won't allow you to move forward without adding these in. You then proceed to save your notes, and then you need to click on an actions button to confirm that the apprentice is gateway ready. Without completing the actions button, this will sit at the training provider's side and won't come through to Pearson to show that the apprentice is ready for gateway. You will then select yes to mark that they're ready for EPA. And once all of the components have been completed by yourselves, a padlock symbol will appear. So like that's shown in the English component on my screen. And this then means that it's locked for you guys. So you won't be able to access those components as the power is then in Pearson's hands. So once you've uploaded your documentation and accepted that the apprentice is ready for gateway, that will come through to Pearson and flag up on our system that the apprentice is ready. Once we get that notification, we will then review the gateway evidence, and that will be reviewed and accepted or rejected within 5 working days. If everything is okay, so all the documentation is there, it's clear and it's correct, we will accept. If a component is missing or the dates don't tally, we would have to reject. So for example, we do see quite often gateway declaration forms coming in with either the gateway date missing or signatures missing, or the date that the apprentice is signed and dated is prior to the gateway meeting date, which obviously is not able to be accepted. We will accept and reject each individual component, and then they will also accept or reject overall. Once we have done that, that will then put the power back in your hands if any further documentation is required. So again, we will place notes in if it's accepted and also if it's rejected, giving you the clear reasons why and the actions that need to be taken. Once the apprentice gateway's been approved, so once we're happy we have everything that we need and it's compliant, we can then move forward and look at scheduling the apprentice and their endpoint assessment components. The apprentice or employer will be contacted within 2 working days from the gateway being accepted to schedule the endpoint assessment components. So as I mentioned before, that information is taken from the ACE system, so it is really helpful to us if that information is there, so we can have both email and phone numbers for the employer and apprentice, and that it's also accurate and up to date. We do contact whoever you guys prefer us to do so. So sometimes you may ask us to go direct to the apprentice, sometimes it's the employer. So we will reach out to them to try and make contact. If we do have any issues in reaching them, after 3 attempts, we will come back to you as providers to ask you to get in touch with them to give them a nudge or to clarify that obviously we have got the correct contact information. So once we make contact with the apprentice or employer, we will aim to schedule the EPA components to take place within 6 to 8 weeks post-gateway sign-off. However, if the apprentice and the independent endpoint assessor have the availability to undertake this sooner and the apprentice is happy to do so, we will try and accommodate that where possible. Now, in regards to any endpoint assessment component, none of these should be undertaken prior to the gateway being signed off. So if, for example, the apprentice is put through their multiple choice exam, but gateway hasn't been signed off by Pearson, that will void the exam, as no component should be undertaken until that has been accepted. So please make sure if you are invigilating your own exams that you make sure that Gateway has been checked on ACE and that it's been accepted, because again, if it has been reviewed and rejected or not reviewed, that would result in that apprentice having to retake that examination. Once the component has been undertaken by the apprentice, the grades and feedback will be issued through the ACE system, and they will be issued within 5 working days, and they will be issued to you as a training provider through the ACE 360 system. So we won't go direct to the apprentice or the employer, it will come back to yourselves, and again that component will be individually graded, and if all components have been done, then an overall grade will be applied. We will also feed back on a document called the notification of results, which can be located in the shared area of ACE, and that will provide detail around the areas that the apprentice has or has not achieved and the reasons why. So if an apprentice was to undertake a component today, so if they were to undertake the competency-based interview, you could expect for the results to be released at some point next Friday through that ACE system. So you have a timescale to know to keep checking your system to make you aware. So we're going to move on to apprentice preparation now. So key things when the apprentice is on programme. So various steps can be taken with the apprentice while they're on their apprenticeship to prepare them for the endpoint assessment. So I'm going to talk you through a few of these now. These are just a couple of ideas for you. Obviously, there are other things that you can consider. So the apprentice could be provided with a copy of the key documents surrounding the endpoint assessment. So, for example, the additional resources document is quite a key document to prepare the apprentices for all components. So really they should be given access to this so they can see what is expected of them and what they should be working towards. So ideally the apprentice should really have this at the beginning of their programme so they can make obviously the most effective use of that document throughout their apprenticeship course. Preparation could be given to the apprentice to talk around their actions. So again, we are looking in the endpoint assessment for what the apprentice does and not what their colleagues do. So if they refer to we, that doesn't give our endpoint assessors a clear indication of what that apprentice's role is. Now, obviously, a lot of people are drilled into making them aware that they're part of a team, and people do find it quite difficult to talk about themselves as I do this, I do that. So again, by getting them into the right mindset throughout their programme to talk in that manner can hopefully support them when it comes to endpoint assessment and they're having to sell themselves in the interview and professional discussion. Mock exams could be undertaken with the apprentice, so endpoint assessment is timed, so the endpoint assessment could be set up as a mock, taking the apprentice through the various components, and again this could be undertaken through different staff members who hasn't been part of their on-programme learning, to get them used to obviously talking to a stranger and obviously to practice getting their information out in a timely and hopefully detailed manner. So that could be quite effective and something that you bring in towards the end of the programme to get them used to those surroundings, so when they are moving forward into endpoint assessment, hopefully they won't be as nervous or it won't be as much of a shock to them, and obviously they're talking to someone totally different and that obviously suddenly they've got a limited amount of time to get their information across. Another key preparation area is the collation of detailed evidence to support the skills and behaviours. So there is a portfolio component as part of the team leader and operational manager endpoint assessment, and as part of that portfolio they are required to submit supporting evidence. So it is key that when that is being collated throughout their own programme that is detailed, rather than obviously get to the end and identify that there is gaps within that. And that's where the key document of the additional resources can come in quite handy, that obviously they can compare what they've got against that information. So what's different about endpoint assessment? So endpoint assessment is very different to on-programme, and that is sometimes where we notice that apprentices are falling down, and it can sometimes be a little bit of a shock to them. On programme, apprentices do undertake a range of visits, obviously over a lengthy time period, and it is normally the same trainer or coach that they see throughout that year, so they have that time to build that relationship. If an apprentice is struggling over an area, obviously they do have the opportunity throughout their course to revisit that area, and obviously the trainer and coach can give them a lot of support and guidance and information as they go along. Now, in apprenticeships, on programme, we do sometimes obviously infer against areas. So we obviously on programme, an apprentice may provide some information and we think, well, we know what they're getting at. And in the assessment as well on programme, if an apprentice was to use the term we, I know that some trainer and coaches do accept that. As part of on programme as well, feedback is being given to the apprentice around the work that they've submitted, which obviously is what you would expect. However, in endpoint assessment world, it is totally different. It is conducted under exam conditions. So that does limit, obviously, what the endpoint assessor can do. So obviously it is underdone exam conditions with signs on the door, a suitable area with no interruptions, and obviously it's somebody that's totally impartial to that apprentice that hasn't met them before. So again, that can be quite nerve-wracking for them. As part of the endpoint assessment, the apprentice is expected to clearly provide detailed information to show their knowledge, skills and behaviours. So we're not able to infer and think we know what the apprentice is getting at. It's very black and white in endpoint assessment. The information is either there and the evidence, or it isn't. All the components come with a time restriction, and there is nothing we can do against that unless the apprentice has put a request forward for special circumstances, which you guys as training providers would raise to Pearson, who would look into that and come back to you with if there's any additional requirements that we can put on for the apprentice. But other than that, the apprentice has a limited time, and unfortunately once we hit that time, there's nothing else we can do if the apprentice hasn't got through the information. So as I've already mentioned, as independent endpoint assessors, we're not allowed to infer. The information is either there or it isn't, and specific examples are required to back up the information that the apprentice is providing. So again, on programme, they may talk quite generically or use the term we. In endpoint assessment, we are interested in how the apprentice has done these activities and how they've done it. So again, we would be looking for specific examples. And also in areas such as a portfolio, we would be expecting for this to be backed up by supporting evidence. As part of on programme, the apprentice may have undertaken a qualification alongside the apprenticeship standard, which is absolutely fine. However, this does not automatically achieve areas of the endpoint assessment. So if an apprentice has undertaken an ILM qualification, for example, that doesn't automatically mean that that is going to reference into the endpoint assessment standard, or that it's to the required detail or sufficiency. And again, it wouldn't automatically be mapped in that because they've done that, it wouldn't automatically tick off criteria for them. So we're going to move into the EPA components now of the team leader and operational departmental manager and the documentation to support in getting the apprentices underway with endpoint assessment. So we're going to look at team leader supervisor level 3 first. You will see there is quite a lot of similar areas that fall into the operational departmental manager as well. So as part of the team leader supervisor level 3 endpoint assessment, the apprentice will undertake 4 components, and they are the multiple choice exam, in which the apprentice has 45 minutes to complete 30 multiple choice questions. Now, the exam is normally invigilated by the training provider unless special arrangements have been made with Pearson. Now, obviously, due to COVID-19 at the moment, we do have some different processes in place that employers are allowed to invigilate. and we do have a guide that has gone out. If you've not got that, I can send that on after the meeting, which provides clear, detailed information around instructions that the employer would need to follow to set themselves up as an invigilator to ensure that we're still compliant in line with the exam conditions. We also then have the portfolio of evidence. So there is 20 questions within the portfolio in which the apprentice is expected to provide specific examples and supporting evidence to back up those examples. The portfolio of evidence is submitted again by the training provider, and that is uploaded to the ACE 360 system into the shared area, and that is where our independent endpoint assessors will be able to access that. If the portfolio is on a portfolio platform, that is absolutely fine. However, we would need to be given login details to access that, and you would need to make sure that that is readily available for any audits that Pearson go through, as we may need access to that for the auditor. We then have the competency-based interview, in which the apprentice is taken through an hour and 30-minute interview. This can go under the hour and 30 minutes, but that is the maximum time that is permitted. That is marked out of 30 as a score, and like the portfolio of evidence, it does cover a wide range of areas of the team leader role. So, for example, things like project management, finance, operational management. The final component of the team leader supervisor is a professional discussion, in which the apprentice has 45 minutes to talk through their development while undertaking their apprenticeship period. So with team leader supervisor, they can be undertaken in any order. It's not stipulated that one has to be done before the other. However, at Pearson, we do ideally recommend that they are done in the order shown on screen. This can help with easing the apprentice in by undertaking the multiple choice exam first. And it just keeps it nice and tidy. So we're able to review the portfolio prior to the interview, and that then means that you're getting the grades back for the interview and discussion at the same time as well. So for operational departmental manager, you'll see that there's 5 components for that area. So again, we have the multiple choice exam, which again comes with the time frame of the 45 minutes. Again, that is out of 30 questions, in which the apprentice will obviously select their answer, and again that examination is invigilated by the training provider, or at the moment, due to the COVID-19, that can be undertaken by the employer as long as the exam conditions are adhered to. If apprentices are currently working from home, that's not an option at the moment that we are able to undertake in regards to the apprentice sitting their multiple choice exam. However, Pearson are currently looking into other methods to support that at the moment, and if something does come from that, communication will be sent out to providers. The next component for operational departmental manager is a project presentation. So this is where the apprentice has undertaken a project during the apprenticeship period, normally agreed between the employer, the provider and the apprentice, and this is normally worked on towards the last 6 months of the qualification. The apprentice will then present their project to the independent endpoint assessor, and for the component, that is a maximum of 30 minutes. However, the apprentice is only permitted to present for 15 out of that 30 minutes. The remaining 15 minutes is then used for the independent endpoint assessor to pose some preset questions around the project presentation. So the apprentice is permitted to present in whatever format they wish to do so, but it is their responsibility to make sure that any technology they wish to use, that they have access to and that they can competently navigate on the day. So for the project presentation, the slides would need to be uploaded to the ACE system no later than 5 working days before the apprentice is due to undertake that component. That just gives the independent endpoint assessor time to have a browse through, so they've got an idea of the topic that the apprentice will be presenting to them on the day. So next we've got the portfolio of evidence. So again, like with the team leader, the apprentice is expected to provide specific examples with supporting evidence of when they've undertaken situations against the portfolio criteria. Again, this is marked out of 20 questions and covers a range of areas such as, again, project management, operational management, finance, as well as others. And again, with the project presentation, the portfolio of evidence will be uploaded to the ACE system. And again, we do ask for this to be uploaded no later than 5 working days before the presentation, interview and professional discussion are due to take place. This then just gives the independent endpoint assessor time to review them and identify any questions they may want to ask, which then can be done on the assessment date of the presentation and interview itself. Again, with the portfolio of evidence, if it is on any portfolio, that is absolutely fine, but as per the team leader, we would need access to that e-portfolio, and again, that will need to be readily available when Pearson are audited. We then have the competency-based interview, which again, the apprentice has 1 hour and 30 minutes, in which they'll be taken through a range of questions. And again, the apprentice will be expected to provide specific examples in response to those questions posed. We then finally have the professional discussion. So again, this is where the apprentice will talk around their learning development during the apprenticeship period, and which they have 45 minutes to do so. Now, for all of these components, in team leader and operational departmental manager, no notes are permitted within the interview or professional discussion. However, the apprentice is permitted to bring along supporting evidence. So by supporting evidence, we mean things like witness testimonies, emails, observations, product evidence. Reflective accounts are not permitted because that is obviously written information from the apprentice, which could be read out. The apprentice doesn't have to bring any supporting evidence, it is entirely themselves. And during the assessment, it is purely the information that the apprentice is verbally providing that is assessed, not the evidence itself. The apprentice is permitted to bring along a pen and paper to the components. They are allowed to make a note of the questions being posed to them. That is absolutely fine. Just at the end of the assessment, the independent endpoint assessor will ask for those to be destroyed because obviously it is a controlled assessment. With the professional discussion, the same again, they are allowed to bring along supporting evidence, so a personal development plan, a CPD log, that is absolutely fine, but again, it is only the verbal information that will be taken into account and marked as part of the assessment. Again, the apprentice isn't allowed to bring in any notes, but they are allowed to bring in a pen and paper, again, to make note of the question posed to them. And again, at the end, the apprentice will be asked to destroy that in front of the independent endpoint assessor. Now, for the departmental manager level 5, for the project presentation, the apprentice is permitted to have some notes to present. However, these should be minimal, maybe bullet points or little prompt cards. Scripted and big paragraphs are not permitted as part of the presentation. This will be checked prior to the presentation commencing to make sure that obviously the apprentice hasn't got a full written script in which they're going to read from to give their information. So for each of the qualifications, we have something called the additional resources document. So the additional resources documents can be a useful tool in preparing your apprentices for endpoint assessment. And we do have these for team leader, supervisor and operations departmental manager. Training providers should be issued with a copy of these, and they do get issued when these are updated. However, if anyone doesn't have these and they're unable to locate them, please let me know and I can arrange for these to be forwarded to you. So I'm going to show you an element of the additional resources document now for the team leader level 3. So evidence requirements. So the screenshot on my slide is of the portfolio component within the additional resources document. So the document does provide information around the various components, and I have placed on my slide the area you can find those in and the page numbers. So all components, as mentioned, are addressed and they can be located on the following pages. So we have the knowledge test, which is pages 2 to 53, the portfolio evidence, which is page 54 to 96, the competency-based interview, which is page 97 to 100, and the professional discussion, which is a page 101 to 105. So I've taken a screenshot of the additional resources document for the portfolio component. So this is a document that can be useful and your apprentice should have while they're on programme, so they can use this to prepare them for endpoint assessment. So this is a portfolio, and this shows you question 1 of the portfolio requirements. So in the middle column, you will see it says assessment criteria and that the apprentice can. So it has question 1, communicate organisational strategy and team purpose to the team effectively, ensuring the message is understood by all. In the right hand column, it then provides you with evidence requirements of what is required from the apprentice. So to meet the criteria, the apprentice must provide suitable work-based evidence that shows they can communicate organisational strategy and team purpose to their team effectively using an appropriate communication approach. So the independent endpoint assessor will be looking that the apprentice has addressed that question with a specific example of when they've undertaken that, and that they've also backed that up with supporting evidence to back up their documented information. The evidence must relate to the example that the apprentice has provided, and it must clearly show the apprentice's role within that. The apprentice does need to have sufficient information and supporting evidence in order to achieve the mark. Within the portfolio of evidence for team leader and operational manager, each question is worth only 1 mark. And even if they give a really detailed specific example of when they've communicated organisational strategy, if the supporting evidence is missing or doesn't support that, they are unable to achieve the mark. Or if they've got great supporting evidence but their commentary is lacking or generic, or if it refers to the term we throughout, again they would be unable to achieve that mark. So within the additional resources document, it does break it down for each question, and then on the right hand side in the column give you information of what is expected, and it also gives you some ideas around what types of evidence could be submitted to support that. So as you can see, we do accept recordings, product evidence, emails, that is absolutely fine. Professional discussions on their own do not count as supporting evidence. That is obviously the apprentice giving their example, but there's nothing to back that up. So professional discussions would still need to be backed up with sufficient supporting evidence. Now, within the additional resources document, as mentioned, it does break it down and show you for each criteria and each area of endpoint assessment of what is required from the apprentice. So as I say, this document is key to allowing them to get prepared and hopefully submit a detailed portfolio and allowing them to be as prepared as possible for their interview and professional discussion, and also knowledge test. So moving on to operational manager now then. So again, there is an additional resources document for operational manager level 5 as well. And again, that does cover all areas of the endpoint assessment. So again, we have information around the knowledge test on page 3 to 54, the portfolio of evidence, page 55 to 104, which again, you will see the similar format when you refer to the document of that just shown in the team leader slide, where it documents the area, the question and the evidence requirements that are expected from the apprentice. The competency-based interview, which is from page 105, the project presentation, which is from page 111, and the professional discussion, which is from page 126. So the screenshot I've taken from the additional resources document for Ops Manager is the competency-based interview. So this shows you the assessment criteria and questions. So this gives you information, the apprentice information of the types of things they may be asked during that interview process. So for example, this is looking at the operational management section. So question 1 is the apprentice response shows the ability to apply operational management approaches and models appropriately in different situations, including creating plans to deliver objectives and setting KPIs. So the independent endpoint assessor during that interview will be looking for the apprentice to provide specific examples of when they've undertaken that activity. Again, within the interview, each question is worth 1 mark only. So, for example, if the apprentice is expected to give examples and they only provide 1 example, they would be unable to achieve that question. This is where writing the question down can come in quite handy for apprentices, because hopefully they will then refer to the question that they've noted down, which can help in keeping them on track, or just jog them that they need to give more than the 1 example. The independent endpoint assessor is permitted to repeat the question as many times as the apprentice wishes to do so. That is absolutely fine. However, that obviously can impact on time, but we do make the apprentice aware that we can repeat the questions. That's not an issue. Now, within operational manager specifically, the questions are quite lengthy, and again, that's where noting down the question can be quite useful for the apprentice, because although we can keep repeating it, they do sometimes forget elements of it, whereas if they've noted it down again, they can refer back to it, and hopefully that will keep them on track and able to address those areas. Again, in Team Leader, there are some quite lengthy ones as well, so again, that can be quite useful for them. So some key points then relating to the standards. So for the team leader supervisor, as I've mentioned already, supporting evidence is permitted, such as witness statements, emails, personal development plans. That is absolutely fine, but as I mentioned, they're not permitted to come in with any written notes for the interview or professional discussion. If the apprentice does come with those, they will be asked to remove them from the assessment, as that can't take place with the apprentice reading from any notes. The apprentice, as mentioned, is permitted to bring along pen and paper to note down the question, and as I've mentioned, we can repeat those questions to the apprentice as many times as they wish to do so. In order to achieve a mark in the portfolio, both the information and supporting evidence have to be sufficient in order for that mark to be achieved. So for operational and departmental manager, as I've mentioned, for the project presentation, they are permitted to have brief notes, so prompt cards or bullet points, but written lengthy notes and scripts are not permitted, and they again will be asked to remove those from the assessment if those are brought along to that component. Supporting evidence is permitted again for the interview and professional discussion, and again there's just some examples there of what could be brought along to those, but again just to reiterate, any supporting evidence the apprentice brings along is not assessed in the interview or presentation or the competency-based interview. It is purely the verbal information the apprentice is providing that is marked. If apprentices don't want to bring along supporting evidence, that's entirely up to themselves, but there is that option there for them. So again, notes are not permitted within the interview or professional discussion for operation departmental manager, but again, they can bring along a pen and paper to note down the question if they wish to do so. Again, at the end of any assessment component, they would be asked to destroy any notes they have made, as it's a controlled assessment. And again, like the team leader, for the portfolio, the supporting evidence and information both have to be sufficient in order for the apprentice to achieve that mark. So overall grading then for the standards. So grading. So during the assessment, the apprentice won't be given any outcome on the day of how they performed. So the independent endpoint assessors do have to remain impartial throughout all components and during the day, and the apprentice is made aware of this, so it's not a total shock once the assessment starts. Obviously we do take a polite and friendly approach, but we do have to make them aware that we have to remain impartial and the reasons why. So once an apprentice has undertaken a component, a grade will be provided within 5 working days, and that will go through the ACE system and will come through to you as training providers. The apprentice is not given any information or grading on the day, as it does go through a quality assurance process at Pearson to make sure that the assessment was conducted fairly and accurately, and to ensure that the correct grading is being applied. Information around grading can be located within the specification document for team leader, supervisor and operational departmental manager. I will take you through this in a moment as well, but if you did want to refer back to this in future, it can be located within the specification document. Again, this is issued out by Pearson, but if you don't have copies of this, please let me know and we can arrange for those to be sent out to you. So looking at team leader supervisor first, so within all components of the team leader supervisor, each component is graded either a fail or a pass. The apprentice is not able to achieve any higher than a pass on either component. So and in order to achieve a pass overall, the apprentice needs to score at least 50% in each component. So the portfolio of evidence is marked out of 20, so the apprentice will need to score at least 10 marks in order to be awarded a pass. The multiple choice exam, they would need to achieve 15 marks. Competency-based interview would also be 15, and the professional discussion would be 10. Now, within the portfolio, the interview and the discussion, the apprentice can pick up marks from any areas. It doesn't matter if they don't score in areas such as finance or project management. We're just looking that overall they have achieved the minimum mark required. So for operations departmental manager level 5, again, it works in exactly the same way, that the highest the apprentice can score on each component is a pass. And again, those marks can come from anywhere within those areas. So again, within the competency-based interview, the apprentice, we're looking that they've achieved 10 marks overall. We're not looking that they've got at least 1 mark in each section. So if they are a bit weaker in an area such as finance or project management, it's not going to disadvantage them if they don't score anything from there, as long as they've got those 10 marks overall. Now, if an apprentice does fail a component, they are able to resit, and that resit will be requested through the ACE system for you guys as well. That would be accepted, and again, the process would then be the same in terms of the apprentice being contacted to schedule a resit date, and obviously, again, that would be undertaken within the 6 to 8 week time frame. If the apprentice needs to resit the portfolio of evidence, the score achieved in the first attempt would still stand. So, for example, if they scored 8 out of 20 in the first attempt, when they come to do their second attempt, that score of 8 would still stand for them. And obviously, the independent endpoint assessor would just look at the areas that the apprentice is resubmitting to hopefully get them over to that pass mark. Now, the team leader and operations departmental manager are not capped. So if the apprentice does need to sit a component 3 times, for example, the portfolio of evidence, that doesn't stop them from getting a distinction overall. Within some standards, if an apprentice fails an area, that can sometimes limit them to getting only a pass as an overall grade. Within team leader and operational manager, that is not the case. In any other areas, if the apprentice is unsuccessful, they would have to complete the whole section again. So if the competency-based interview, if they are unsuccessful, they would have to go through that full process again for that component, and nothing would transfer over. They would be expected again to start from scratch, and they would need to achieve the minimum score. So as I mentioned, to achieve a pass in any of the components, the apprentice needs to score at least 50%. And once the apprentice has undertaken all of the components, an overall grade can then be applied. So the marks from each component are then totaled together to identify the overall grade. But please note, the outcome will be a fail if the apprentice has not achieved at least 50% in all components. So, for example, if they've passed the interview and the professional discussion and portfolio, but they fail the multiple choice exam, it would be a fail grade overall. We can only apply that overall grading once the apprentice has undertaken each component. However, as mentioned, we do grade each component once they've undertaken it. So on the ACE system, you would see what we've graded at the interview, but until all the other components have been sat and completed, you wouldn't see an overall grading for that apprentice. So overall grading for team leader supervisor then. So the apprentice can achieve an overall grade of a pass, merit or distinction or fail once they've undertaken all components. So as mentioned, a fail will be applied if all components haven't achieved at least the minimum of the 50% mark. So to get the pass, the apprentice must achieve a minimum of 50% in each of the four assessment components. And their score would range from 50 to 59 marks in total in order for that pass element to be achieved. It then breaks it down what the minimum marks are for each component. So as mentioned, for the multiple choice test, it is out of 30, so they would need to get 15 marks and so on and so forth. And again, this is in the document specification, which again contains this information and breakdown of grading. So to achieve a merit, again, the apprentice would need to get the 50% in each component at least, and their overall marks would need to come between 60 to 69 marks in total. And to achieve a distinction, the apprentice will need to achieve at least 70 marks in total, again, ensuring that they've achieved at least 50% in each component. So as I've mentioned, it doesn't matter if the apprentice takes 3 attempts. If their scores come to over 70 in their 3rd attempt, they would still achieve the distinction grading. So overall grading for departmental manager. So again, for the fail, that would be if each component hasn't achieved at least the 50%. So to achieve the pass, they would need, again, to achieve a range of marks between 50 to 59, with 50% being achieved in each of the 5 components. And again, it just gives you the breakdown there, the minimum score required, which again can be located in the specification document. For the merit, again, the apprentice would need to obtain a total score of 60 to 69 marks. And for the distinction, like the team leader, they would need to achieve at least 70 marks in total, again with at least 50% being achieved in all 5 areas. And as a team leader with operational manager, the grading isn't capped. So as mentioned, if it took them 2 or 3 attempts, it doesn't impact on their overall grade, that they would only get a pass. They can still achieve that distinction area. So that is the end of the presentation. So I can't see any questions in the chat box at the moment, but I will just give a few minutes in case anyone does have any questions they'd like to pop in there for me. So it doesn't look like we've got any questions from the presentation today. So I'd just like to thank everybody for joining me today. If you do think of anything after today's presentation, please get in touch and we're more than happy to address those. We are putting together documents from any questions raised, which can be released to support other providers. So if there is anything you would like to ask, that's not a problem. But for those of you that are quite happy, thank you very much. So I've just seen a question come through from Mandy asking if we can send an up-to-date link for the resources. That's absolutely fine. I can send an up-to-date link out to make sure everyone's got the up-to-date versions of the documentations. So today's presentation will also be uploaded to Pearson's website, so it can be referred back to at a later date if you need to do so. If there's no further questions, I'd just like to thank you all for joining me today and have a lovely day and keep safe.